people don't realize, right? And I always say, and I've said this before as well, that when you talk about house and land packages, typically when you're doing it in the growth cycle, yes, you'll catch up the money, but you never know when this cycle is going to end. And so for people who have never seen this cycle end, they'll always think that this is the new normal, and they'll still keep going and, keep
buy like 5-10 blocks at the same time. We've
100%
those stories.
Over risk, right? Or, you're basically extending yourself. I know this one particular person, who bought like 20 of them at 10,000 or 20,000 deposit each. And he's like, oh, I have $200,000 sitting there. Why would I go buy one house? I'll just put 20K on 10 of these lots. And I think he got like 10K on 20 of these lots, ended up settling one, losing everything else because, the market went backwards, right? And, typically this is what happens. This is what a normal market looks like. This is what markets does. These are what the cycle does. No one can scam the cycle.
Yes.
Right? That's the most important thing. And people think that, okay, I can scam the cycle. And there are people, right? I kid you not, I see people who scam this and they come out and they're lucky. They're the luckiest bastard they were. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The luckiest bastard they were. And then they pretend that they con the market. They pretend that they know it all. They are the fig jams. I call them fig jams. Fig jam is like, fuck, I'm good. Just ask me, right? So they're the fig jams of the property market, right? They'd be like, just ask me. I'm the property guru. I'm the, next best thing to Elon Musk. I'm the best thing to, next best thing than, water. Yeah.
Barbecue experts,
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Barbecue, they're experts at everyone's barbecue.
Yeah. And so, if you listen to these people, of course, that's the perfect scam. Everyone is in that, when you talk about house and land. And so typically you see companies who are selling duplexes or development sites, they are playing into this scam as well, typically, right? They're asking you to buy the land, build it, play on the growth side. They'll deliver you a good story. But then next thing you know, the market readjusts, and then, you have two products or two stock that you have done with, and then they're losing shit ton of money there.
Yes, and look, full disclosure, I fell for this one, and even before I first started my business, I fell for this, and I actually sold some of these in Toowoomba. This is a moment of vulnerability where, I admit that it could have been, sure, right now, everything's relatively good, but at that time, it took about 10 years for them to recoup their money because the builder ended up going bankrupt halfway at the end. Didn't pay the headwork fees. So not only were they left with no equity, but they were left with paying the council headwork fees to subdivide the blocks. And anyone says in my experience, anyone that says they can subdivide the block and make instant equity through duplex, don't do it.
It's not a true development, right? I think a lot of people think that building a single house or building a normal duplex is a true development. I say this in all honesty, that just because you can subdivide the block or you can build two there, that does not mean that you should do it. Does not create equity. For developments to work, there needs to be a price discrepancy. The price discrepancy that the retail price of the land and the wholesale price of the land needs to be distinctive, very, very far between the two. And so what you're doing is you're buying the land at wholesale, subdividing it, and the retail product needs to be a lot more expensive for the numbers to work. It's funny. I was looking at one of these deals where, probably about a year or 2 years ago, right? And this client, it came to me and said, look at this on paper, looks really well. And I said to him, he hasn't accounted for GST. And he's like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, your exit strategy is sell, right? You're not going to hold them. You sell them, you're going to pay at least $150,000 worth of GST on this. You can't get out of this. And he's like, oh, but I'm doing it in my personal profile. I was like, no, brand new properties, if you sell within the first 5 years, you have to pay GST on them. And he's like, oh, I didn't know that. And I was like, well, that goes away your profit. This is it, right? So where is the profit? There is no profit in the deal. He's like, oh, but I can claim it. And I was like, didn't you just told me that it's in your personal profile? And so there is a lot of these tricky bits that people don't realize and understand. And they get into this thinking that, oh, just because this person has done it in a growing market, it would work for me. But it doesn't, So it's very interesting. Another one is, and I've come across this very recently, where this person was selling house and land packages with $0 deposit. So they said, I don't need any money from you.
Can I buy a few?
No, I was like, this is too good to be true, right? And so I called that person. I was like, this sounds like amazing. Like on paper, like anyone would, bite into this, right? And so this is what his story was. He's like, you don't pay us anything. You don't have to pay anything. You just sign the contract. The house is yours, but you have to select it from our list of products. And I was like, so what's the catch? And he's like, so what happens is we would hold 20% of your property as equity. And so when it grows up in value, then you will refinance it and as pays out. And I was like, oh, so wait a minute. I now understand what you're trying to do. And he's like, what do you mean? And I was like, okay, so there is a house which is worth, say, 500. You're selling it probably for 600. So that's the 20%. You're getting that kickback back from the builder for an extra $100,000. You're still holding my property ransom for an extra 20%. And so typically you're making 40%. And so while you are taking me to the bank to get the loan, you're paying that 20% that's already built up in the price. And so why do you need an extra 20% from my property? And he's like, oh, but no, you're confusing this way too much. And this is not how it's supposed to work. And I was like, no, I understand the scam. It's amazing that, you have thought so logically through that you can get people to buy this. But like, I can see so many homeowners desperate enough to basically fall into this mix, right? That, they'll think about it. They'd be like, well, yeah, this is amazing. I don't have to pay anything to these people. And I'll buy one of their stock product right now in a whoop somewhere.
Yes.
And all I have to do is just offer them 20% of my equity share within the property.